I remember the sound more than anything. The soft rasp of a zipper closing, the little click when the suitcase handle locked into place. I was standing on the front steps of the house I'd lived in for almost 12 years, holding two suitcases like they were proof I still existed. The stone under my shoes was cold, even though it was early September. A sprinkler somewhere down the block kept ticking, steady and indifferent. A man with a camera moved too close and called out, "Mrs. Carlyle, over here!" I didn't turn my head. I kept my eyes on the driveway. "Tell us the truth," someone else said. "Did he leave you with nothing?" Another voice, sharper. "Are you homeless now?" That one landed. Not because it was accurate, but because it was almost accurate. I stopped walking for half a second, just long enough for my hand to tighten around the suitcase handle. Behind the bay window on the second floor, I could see Grant. He didn't come outside. He didn't need to. He stood there like he was watching a scene he'd already approved. His arm was around Tessa's waist. She was in her mid-20s, blonde, and she was wearing the silk robe I used to wear when I made coffee on Sunday mornings and pretended I was loved. Grant lifted his mug in a small, careless toast. Tessa laughed into his shoulder like this was a private joke. My throat was sore from the night before. If I spoke, I didn't trust what would come out. So I didn't speak. I just kept moving, one step at a time, my heels clicking against the driveway stones. And as I crossed the gate, I noticed something that didn't fit. A plain white envelope, half tucked under the ironwork near the mailbox. No stamp, no return address, like someone had tried to deliver a message without being seen. I didn't pick it up. I got into an Uber and put my phone face down in my lap. The driver didn't ask questions. He kept his eyes on the road. I watched the neighborhood slide away in the side mirror and tried to breathe like it was any other Tuesday. I didn't know it yet, but 3 days later, a woman in a charcoal suit would find me in a motel parking lot and say my name like she'd been practicing it. I didn't know what she was going to offer me. I only knew I was leaving, and everyone wanted to watch. The story people read was simple. Social wife gets tossed out. Rich husband wins. Another pretty woman takes her place. It fit on one line. It fit on a headline. My real life didn't fit anywhere. Not in print. Not in the way my hands shook when I tried to hold a suitcase steady. Not in the way my cards stopped working 3 weeks ago, one by one, as if someone had quietly turned off the lights in every room of my life. Grant called it a temporary financial pause during the divorce process. His attorney called it standard procedure. I called it panic. By the time the Uber dropped me off, I had a single motel key card and a reservation that ended in 7 days. The place was in Elizabeth, New Jersey, close to the highway, close to the airport, close to nothing that felt like safety. The lobby smelled like disinfectant and old air. A small TV played a daytime talk show at low volume. No one was watching it. My room had a brown bedspread with a burn mark near the corner. The wallpaper was peeling behind the lamp. The air conditioner rattled every time it kicked on, like it was arguing with itself. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the mirror above the dresser. The woman staring back looked like she'd misplaced her life and couldn't remember where she last set it down. I was 39. I had no job. I used to work in marketing, the kind of job where people say brand strategy a lot and pretend it's not just problem solving with nicer lighting. I left it years ago because Grant said it made us look strange. His wife shouldn't be answering to anyone. He framed it like he was protecting me. What he was really protecting was his control. The first 2 days, I didn't do much besides cry and sleep in broken pieces. I ate a few crackers from a vending machine and drank tap water from a plastic cup. I kept replaying the courtroom in my head, like my brain thought it could change the outcome if it examined the details enough times. Grant's lawyer had described me as if I was a person he'd invented for a lawsuit. Lazy, manipulative, opportunistic. A woman who contributed nothing and expected everything. I didn't interrupt. I didn't perform. I sat still and kept my hands folded because I was raised to believe composure counts for something. It didn't. On the third day, I forced myself into the shower. The water came out too hot, then too cold, then settled into lukewarm. I washed my hair with the motel's tiny bottle of shampoo and put on jeans that didn't fit right anymore. I went outside because the room felt like it was shrinking. In the parking lot, the sun was bright in a way that made everything look tired. Cars passed on the road beyond the fence. A dog barked somewhere, then stopped. I sat on the curb beside my suitcase and looked at my phone, debating whether to call my father again. He hadn't answered the last 6 times. I was staring at the screen, thumb hovering, when a black Mercedes turned in slowly and parked one space away from me. The engine stayed on. The windows were tinted. For a moment, I didn't move. I just sat there and watched it idle, like the car was thinking. Then the driver's window lowered. A woman in her 50s leaned slightly toward the opening. Her hair was neat, her face calm, her voice measured. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Lena Carlisle?" I didn't answer right away. The question felt too precise to be casual. People in motels didn't usually get addressed by full name in quiet, careful voices. My first thought was a reporter. My second thought was someone sent by Grant's attorney to finish what the courtroom started. I stood up slowly, not dramatic, just steady. I kept one hand on the suitcase handle like it was an anchor. The woman opened her door and stepped out. She didn't rush. She didn't smile too hard. She moved like someone used to being listened to. Charcoal suit, clean lines, a leather folder tucked under her arm. Shoes that didn't belong in a motel parking lot. "I'm not doing interviews," I said. My voice came out flat, thin from lack of sleep. "I'm not media," she replied. "My name is Clara Mendez. I'm an attorney." That word, attorney, usually made my stomach tighten. It still did. But her tone didn't have that sharp edge Grant's people always carried, like they were speaking from a script written to corner me. "I don't have money," I said, "and I'm not signing anything else." "I'm not here about your divorce." She paused, then added, "I've been trying to locate you for 3 days." That was the first moment I felt a flicker of something that wasn't just exhaustion. Not fear exactly, more like confusion turning its head. "Why," I asked, "would an attorney be looking for me?" She glanced toward the motel office, then back to me, as if she was choosing her words carefully. "This is about your great-uncle," she said. "Samuel Hartfield." I blinked. I hadn't heard that name in years. Not since I was a kid. Not since family gatherings where adults spoke in half-sentences and changed subjects when someone walked into the room. I remembered Samuel as a quiet man who stood slightly apart. He watched more than he talked. When he did speak, it was short, like he was counting the cost of every word. My father used to call him difficult. My mother called him a problem. That was the family language for anyone who didn't fall in line. "What about him?" I asked. Clara's face softened in a way that didn't feel rehearsed. "He passed away 2 weeks ago," she said. "And he left you his estate?" I let out a small laugh before I could stop it. It wasn't joy, it was disbelief, the kind that makes your body respond wrong. "That's not possible," I said. "I barely knew him." "He knew you," she replied. And then she opened her folder and held it out, not like a weapon, more like an offering. "May I sit for a minute?" There was a faded concrete bench near the side of the lot. We walked there without speaking. The air smelled like warm asphalt and cheap laundry detergent. A plane passed overhead, low and loud, and for a few seconds, we couldn't hear each other. When the sound faded, Clara set the folder on her lap and turned the top page so I could see. My name printed clearly. Legal formatting, a seal, dates, the kind of paper that changes lives because someone says it does. I stared at the numbers first, because my brain wanted something solid to hold. I saw the words Manhattan property and investment accounts. I saw an estate valuation that made my eyes go slightly unfocused. 60 million, Clara said quietly. Approximately. The full inventory is extensive. The main residence is on the Upper East Side. I sat very still. My whole body felt like it didn't know what to do with information that big. It didn't feel real. It felt like a scam that would end with me handing over my last $100. "You're sure you have the right person?" I said. Clara nodded once. "I'm sure." I looked down at my hands. I noticed the faint red mark on my ring finger, where my wedding ring used to sit. I noticed my nails were chipped. Small details. My mind kept trying to pull the moment back into a size it could manage. "I don't understand," I said. "Why would he leave it to me?" Clara didn't answer right away. She reached into the folder again and pulled out a second envelope, cream-colored, thick paper, my name handwritten across the front in a precise, elegant script. "He left you a letter," she said. "There are instructions. Conditions, too." Of course there were. I held the envelope without opening it. The paper felt heavier than it should have, like it was carrying time in it. "What conditions?" I asked. "You need to live in the residence for 6 months," Clara said. "Alone. You can't sell or transfer any assets during that period. If you complete the term and follow the requirements, the estate becomes yours outright." My first instinct was relief. A place to sleep, food, stability. My second instinct was suspicion again, colder this time. "Why alone?" I asked. Clara's eyes stayed on mine. "Samuel was very specific." I swallowed. "What happens if I don't?" Clara's voice stayed even. "Then the estate is redirected according to the alternate instructions." She didn't say where. She didn't have to. I could hear it anyway. "You lose it." I looked past her at the motel rooms lined up like boxes, curtains half closed, TVs flickering behind thin walls. I thought of the voicemail I'd left my father, the way my sister had hung up on me without letting me finish a sentence. I thought of Grant, raising his coffee mug from behind the window, like my life was something he'd successfully deleted. Clara waited. She didn't push. She let silence sit between us like it had a purpose. I turned the envelope over once in my hands. Then I looked at her and said, "If this is real, I'll do it." "It's real," she said. "And I believe you should do it." I nodded, once, like I was agreeing to something small, like I was agreeing to take a meeting. Clara reached into her pocket and handed me a simple set of keys on a ring. No dramatic flourish, just metal and weight. "Pack what you need," she said. "We'll go today." I stood up with the keys in my hand and felt my knees wobble slightly. Not from weakness, from the sudden shift in gravity, like the world had moved and I was still catching up. I picked up my suitcase, then the other one. And as I followed Clara toward the Mercedes, I realized I'd left my phone on the concrete bench. I turned back, grabbed it, and saw one missed call. Unknown number. I stared at the screen for a second, then I put the phone face down in my palm and kept walking. The drive into the city felt quiet in a way I hadn't experienced in weeks. Clara didn't fill the air with reassurance. She didn't tell me everything would be fine. She drove with both hands on the wheel and let the traffic speak for itself. I watched the skyline come into view through the windshield, the glass towers catching late afternoon light, the river flashing between them for a second, and then disappearing behind concrete. I kept the keys in my pocket, my fingers touching them every few minutes like I needed to confirm they were still there. At a red light, Clara said, "Before we arrive, there are a few practical things." I looked over. "Okay." "You will need identification. A bank will require it for any immediate access, even with the documents. We will do this in steps." The word steps steadied me. Something in my chest loosened a fraction. Not hope, exactly. Structure. Clara continued. "Also, your situation with your accounts being frozen. That may not be resolved quickly. We won't rely on it." I didn't ask how she knew. It was in the papers. It was in the headlines. It was in the way my life had become public property for anyone with an opinion. I just nodded. We turned onto a tree-lined street on the Upper East Side, where everything looked too polished to be real. Sidewalks swept clean. Building facades kept in perfect condition. Even the air felt different, like it belonged to people who never had to check their bank balance before ordering dinner. The townhouse came into view slowly, set back behind iron gates, 4 stories of dark brick and tall windows. The kind of place that doesn't try to be impressive because it doesn't need to. Clara parked and got out first. She walked to the gate keypad, entered a code, and pulled it open. I stood on the sidewalk for a second before stepping through. I could hear the city, but muted, like I was entering a separate room inside it. Clara handed me a smaller key. Front door. I walked up the steps and unlocked it with hands that were steady now. Not because I felt brave, because my body had moved past panic into focus. The door opened into a foyer that smelled like old wood and closed rooms. The ceilings were high enough to make sound travel. My footsteps echoed back to me as if the house was listening. Furniture sat under white sheets. A chandelier hung above, catching stray light and throwing it across marble in small, cold patches. Paintings lined the walls, framed and heavy, faces and landscapes I didn't recognize. Clara took out a thin packet of papers and set it on a side table. There are initial inventories here. Basic house systems, alarm codes, the caretaker's contact information, though he is not to enter unless you request it. I took in the words slowly. Alarm codes, systems, contact information. A normal life reorganized into paperwork. Am I really alone here? I asked. Clara's eyes moved briefly across the foyer, then back to me. Yes, that is part of the instruction. And if someone shows up, I said, thinking of cameras, thinking of people calling my name outside my old house. They will, Clara replied, calm, as if she was discussing weather. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow, but they will. I felt my shoulders tighten. How soon will my family know? They have been notified of the will, she said. Notification is a legal requirement once probate begins. It does not mean they have rights to the property. I didn't like the way that sat in my stomach. I turned slightly, looking back at the front door like I could already hear the bell. Clara continued. It will be important that you follow the terms. Do not leave overnight. Do not invite anyone to live here. Do not sign any documents unless I am present. I nodded again, still not asking questions I didn't want answers to. She walked with me through the first floor, pointing out practical things instead of giving a tour. The kitchen was large and unused, counters spotless, cabinets closed, appliances that looked expensive and untouched. The living room held furniture under sheets and a fireplace with a dark, clean grate. The dining room had a long table covered, like it was waiting for a dinner no one had hosted in years. At the back of the first floor, there was a small security panel beside a door that led into a narrow hallway. Clara showed me how to arm it. Cameras, she said, pointing toward a small monitor on the wall. It was off. These are not currently active, but the wiring is in place. We can activate a modern system if you want. We will, I said without thinking. Clara didn't comment. She just nodded once, like she had expected that answer. We went upstairs. Second floor, rooms that looked like guest suites. Third floor, a library with shelves that reached the ceiling and a deep quiet that made me lower my voice without meaning to. Fourth floor, a master bedroom with tall windows and a view of the city that felt like it belonged to someone else. When we came back down, Clara stopped in front of the staircase and said, "Before I leave you, there's one more thing." She reached into her folder and handed me a second envelope. This one was also heavy paper, but larger, sealed with wax. "Read this tonight," she said. "Not now. Tonight, when you're settled." "What is it?" I asked. "Samuel's instructions," she replied. "The personal part." I turned the envelope over. My name was written on it in the same elegant hand, Lena Carlisle. The letters looked like they had time in them, like they had been written slowly.
Clara looked at her watch.
I have arranged immediate essentials. Groceries will be delivered within the hour. A locksmith will come tomorrow morning to change exterior locks. I will return in 2 weeks unless you call sooner. 2 weeks. Alone. I held the envelope closer to my chest, not in a dramatic way, just like it belonged there. Clara walked toward the door, then paused. One more boundary. I looked up. If anyone contacts you, family, press, anyone at all, do not engage, she said. Do not argue, do not defend yourself. Silence is protection here. Let me do the talking. I thought of my old life, where silence had been interpreted as agreement, where staying calm had been used against me. But this felt different. This felt like a rule, not a surrender. I understand, I said. Clara opened the door and stepped out. Before she left, she added, You can call me at any time, day or night. Then she was gone, and the house became very still. I stood in the foyer for a long moment, listening to the quiet settle. It wasn't peaceful yet. It was just absence. But it was mine to manage. I set my suitcases down near the staircase. I walked room to room slowly, pulling sheets off furniture in small sections, not because I needed the rooms uncovered, but because I needed my hands doing something. I opened curtains. Light came in reluctantly, like it had been locked out for a long time. In the kitchen, I found a kettle in a cabinet and set it on the stove. I didn't turn it on. I just placed it there, a small act of making the space behave like a home. When the groceries arrived, I opened the door carefully and kept the chain on. A delivery man left the bags on the steps and walked away without looking at me twice. I carried them in one by one. Bread, fruit, tea, eggs, plain food, things with labels that didn't care who I was. That night, I took a shower in the master bathroom and stood under the water until my shoulders loosened. I put on one of the motel t-shirts I'd been sleeping in, then realized I didn't want to wear anything from that room anymore. In a closet on the 3rd floor, I found clothing under garment bags. Older styles, carefully preserved, dresses that looked like they belonged in a different decade. I chose a soft cotton robe and put it on. It fit as if it had been altered for me, which made me pause, hand resting on the belt tie. I went downstairs to the library and turned on a lamp. The light was warm, steady. It made the shelves feel less like a museum and more like a room someone used. I sat at the long table, placed the sealed envelope in front of me, and stared at it for a full minute without touching it. My mind kept circling back to the same questions. Why me? Why now? Why alone? I slid a finger under the wax seal and broke it carefully. The paper tore with a soft sound that felt too loud in the quiet. Inside was a letter. A few pages, handwritten. The ink was dark, the script neat. I read the first line once, then again, because it didn't feel like something written by a stranger. Lena, you do not know me well. Not in the way people usually mean. But I have known you for a long time. I didn't keep reading yet. I lowered the paper and stared at the lamp for a moment, the way someone does when they realize they are about to learn something that changes the shape of their past. Then I picked the letter back up, took a slow breath, and continued reading. I read the letter slowly, not because it was hard to understand, but because it felt like something I needed to take in at a human pace. Samuel's handwriting stayed consistent, even and controlled. No dramatic flourishes, no begging. Just the tone of a man who had already decided what he believed. He wrote that he had watched me grow up from a distance, that he'd seen me at family events when I was little, and later through quieter means. He said he knew about my marriage long before the tabloids did. He said he knew Grant didn't just leave me, he dismantled me. He didn't write it as gossip. He wrote it like a fact in a file. Then the letter shifted. This isn't only an inheritance, he wrote. It's a test of whether you can hold your ground when the people who taught you to shrink come back and demand space. He warned me without naming names. He didn't need to. He wrote about the pattern, the way certain people treat love like leverage, the way family can behave like creditors. I got to the part about the 6 months and understood it more clearly. You must remain in the house, alone, he wrote, because they will try to enter your life again. They will try to move in, to manage, to negotiate. They will offer comfort and call it concern. They will offer help and call it love. If you let them change the terms, the estate will not be yours. I set the letter down and stared at the page like it might change if I looked away. I did something small and practical. I walked to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, drank it slowly. Then I came back, sat down again, and read the rest. At the end, there was one line that stayed with me more than the rest. When silence is chosen, it becomes strength. I folded the letter once, carefully, and put it back in the envelope. I didn't frame it. I didn't treat it like a trophy. I placed it in the top drawer of the desk in the library and closed the drawer all the way until it clicked. Then I walked through the house, turning off lights, checking locks, moving like a person who had work to do. That first week was quiet, but it wasn't relaxing. It was the kind of quiet where you hear everything. Pipes settling, wood creaking, the soft hum of electricity. I slept in fragments, waking at 2 a.m., then 4 a.m., then again just before dawn. Each time, I lay still and listened until my breathing returned to normal. I didn't contact anyone. I didn't post anything. I didn't answer unknown numbers. On the 5th day, I found a small binder in the foyer side table where Clara had left the packet. House instructions, basic operating procedures. Alarm panel, smoke detectors, gate codes. It was all written like the home was an office that needed maintenance. I made myself treat it that way. I took a legal pad from the desk in the library and wrote down what I needed, not what I felt. Step 1, change exterior locks. Step 2, install cameras. Step 3, forward mail to a secure P.O. box. Step 4, replace phone number if needed. Step 5, keep a record of every contact attempt. I didn't write a step about emotions. I didn't write a step about healing. I wrote what would keep me inside the terms and outside everyone else's reach. The locksmith came the next morning. I didn't open the door until I saw his company name on the van and confirmed it with Clara by text. He worked quietly, replaced the main lock sets, gave me new keys, and left without asking anything personal. That night, I slept a little longer. On day 8, the doorbell rang. It was mid-morning. Light came in through the front windows in clean, bright rectangles. I was in the kitchen making tea, the kettle beginning to hiss softly. The bell startled me so hard I turned off the burner without thinking. I walked to the foyer and looked at the monitor Clara had pointed out. It still wasn't active. The old wiring was there, but no live feed. I moved to the side window instead and looked through the glass. My sister stood on the steps. Avery. Her hair was styled the way it always was when she wanted to look harmless. Her coat was cream-colored, fitted, expensive. She held a small bag in one hand, like she'd brought pastries, like she'd come to make things normal again. I stood there for a moment with my hand on the doorknob, letting my brain do what it always did with family. Calculate, minimize, prepare to absorb. Then I remembered Samuel's letter. Silence is chosen. I unlocked the door but kept the chain on. Avery's face changed the second she saw me, softening into something that looked like relief. She leaned closer, eyes bright. "Lena," she said, voice low. "Oh my God." I didn't step forward. I didn't match her energy. She reached for the chain reflexively, as if she was used to doors opening fully for her. When it didn't, her hand paused in midair. She recovered quickly, letting it drop as if she hadn't meant to touch it. "I've been worried," she said. "I didn't know where you were. I tried calling." I watched her carefully. She was good at this part, concern that sounded like affection. "How did you find me?" I asked. Her expression flickered, just a fraction. I called around, she said. I asked people. I asked a lawyer's office, and they said... They said what? I asked, still calm. Avery blinked and shifted her grip on the bag. They said you were here. It wasn't an answer. It was a placeholder. I didn't accuse her of lying. I didn't need to. I just let the silence stretch long enough for the truth to show itself in her discomfort. Finally, she tried again, softer. I heard about Uncle Samuel. I kept my voice level. No one in this family spoke his name for years. Her eyes narrowed slightly, then softened again, like she was adjusting a mask. People make mistakes. I made mistakes. I should have been there for you during the divorce. I didn't respond. She kept talking anyway, stepping into the space the silence left. I was scared. I didn't know what to say. And then I saw the news and I realized, I can't stay away. You're my sister. The word sister sounded like a key she expected to work in any lock. I opened the door a little wider but left the chain on. Not inviting, not refusing, just controlled. What do you want? I asked. Avery let out a small breath as if she was grateful I'd asked. To help. To be here. To make sure you're not alone. She glanced past me into the foyer, eyes catching the chandelier, the marble, the staircase. She didn't look away fast enough. I watched the glance. It was quick, but it carried weight. You can't stay here, I said. Avery's face tightened. Why not? I didn't answer immediately. I could have told her about the 6-month condition. I could have explained that inviting anyone in would risk everything. But Samuel had been clear. People would use explanations as handles. So I gave her less. Because I said no, I replied. Avery's smile held for half a second too long. Then it slipped. You're being cold, she said, voice changing. After everything you've been through, I'm trying to show up. I looked at her the way I used to look at Grant's attorney. Not with fear, with attention. I didn't ask you to show up, I said. She stared at me, then lifted the bag slightly. I brought food. Keep it, I said. That was when she dropped the softness completely. It wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was just a shift into something sharper. You can't handle this on your own, she said. You're not built for it. I felt my pulse quicken, but my hand stayed still on the door edge. Goodbye, Avery, I said. Her eyes hardened. Fine, but don't pretend you can do this without family. People are going to come after you for this house, for this money. You don't understand what you're sitting on. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just held her gaze until she looked away first. She stepped back, smoothed her coat like she was restoring dignity, then turned and walked down the steps without hugging me, without looking back. I closed the door, slid the deadbolt, and rested my forehead against the wood for a moment. Then I went to the library and wrote one sentence on the legal pad. Day 8. Avery arrived. Asked to stay. Refused. Tone shifted when denied. I didn't label it as betrayal. I labeled it as data. 2 days later, my father arrived. He didn't ring the bell once. He rang it twice, then knocked, as if doors were supposed to respond to him. I watched from the side window before I opened anything. Gerald Carlyle stood on my steps holding a bottle of scotch like it was a peace offering. He wore a tailored coat, expensive watch, the look of a man used to rooms opening for him, too. I opened the door with the chain still on. Lena, he said, voice smooth. May I come in? I should have said no, but old habits run deep. So do old fears. I unhooked the chain and let him inside, then relocked the door immediately behind him. He walked into the foyer the way Avery had, eyes moving over everything, measuring. He didn't comment on my face, my exhaustion, the fact that I was still rebuilding myself in plain increments. He looked at the house. Samuel always had taste, he said lightly. I kept my voice even. You didn't come here to compliment his taste. He turned toward me, scotch bottle hanging at his side. His expression didn't change much, but his eyes sharpened. No, he said. I came here to talk about what you've stepped into. He moved a few feet closer, as if we were in his office, as if the space belonged to his authority. This inheritance is complicated, he said. Samuel was unpredictable. There may be debts, obligations, people who believe they're owed. I have an attorney, I said. He gave a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. You have Samuel's attorney, not yours. He named her, I said. That doesn't make her loyal to you, Gerald replied. It makes her loyal to his agenda. I didn't correct him. I didn't explain Clara's role. I watched him try to plant doubt and noted how natural it was for him. Gerald set the scotch down on the side table like he was claiming a surface. You need professional protection, he said. A trust, a structure. My team can handle it. And what do you get? I asked. He sighed, like I was being difficult for no reason. I'm your father. I held his gaze. You didn't answer my calls during the divorce. His jaw tightened slightly. That situation was messy. It was my life, I said. He looked at me for a second, as if he was deciding whether to soften. He didn't. I was trying to teach you to be smarter, he said. I felt something settle into place. Not anger. Clarity. You're not here to protect me, I said. You're here to get access. His eyes hardened. You're being naive. I nodded once. No, I'm learning. We stood in the foyer in a quiet standoff, the chandelier above us catching light in a way that made everything look too clean for what was happening. Finally, Gerald picked up the scotch bottle again. You're making a mistake, he said. When this falls apart, don't come to me. He walked out without waiting for a reply. I locked the door behind him, then wrote another line on my legal pad. Day 10. Gerald arrived, offered legal team, requested control, refused. That night, I emailed Clara with the facts only. No emotion, just time, actions, words used. Clara replied with one sentence. Good, keep documenting. And then, on day 12, the doorbell rang again, longer this time. Not one press, not two, a rapid series, impatient, demanding. I walked to the front door, already feeling the change in my body, the way it prepared for conflict without panic. I looked through the peephole. A man stood there with his tie loose and his eyes unfocused, leaning slightly as if the world wasn't holding him up properly. My cousin, Trevor Hartfield. And I could smell the alcohol through the door before I even opened it. I didn't open the door right away. Trevor kept pressing the bell in short bursts, like he could wear the wiring down. Through the peephole, I could see his shoulders shifting, his weight not fully balanced. He was dressed like he'd come from somewhere he wanted to impress, but the details were wrong. Tie loose, shirt untucked, eyes too bright. I opened the door with the chain on. Lena, he said, smiling like we were close. His breath hit the crack in the door, sharp with alcohol. So it's true. What do you want? I asked. He leaned closer, trying to look past me into the foyer. To see what's mine. It isn't, I said. He laughed once, like I'd told a joke. Samuel was my great-uncle too. I'm the oldest male. That matters. It didn't matter to him, I said. Trevor's face changed. The smile collapsed into something tighter. You think you're special because you got embarrassed in court and now you got rescued? I didn't respond. He reached for the door edge, testing it, then pushed harder. The chain held. The metal tugged against the frame with a dry clink. Go home, I said. Trevor stared at the chain, then back at me. You can't hide in there forever. I looked at him for a moment, then said, I'm calling the police if you don't leave the steps. His eyes narrowed, and for a second I thought he might keep pushing, just to see if I would follow through. Then his attention drifted toward the street, toward the idea of witnesses and consequences. He stepped back, hands raised in a sloppy gesture of surrender. "Fine," he said. "But you're going to lose it anyway. They're not letting you keep this." He turned and walked away, swaying slightly as he went down the steps. I waited until he reached the sidewalk, then I closed the door, slid the deadbolt, and wrote it down. Day 12. Trevor arrived intoxicated, demanded access, refused, threatened future challenge. I texted Clara the same facts. No feelings, no adjectives. Clara replied within minutes. "Do not open the door for him again. I am moving up the security installation." 2 days later, cameras went up inside and out, modern and quiet, with a live feed on my phone. A new alarm system replaced the old panel. Motion sensors, door contacts, a gate code that only Clara and I had. Clara also handed me a printed inventory list Samuel had prepared, item by item, like he'd turned his life into a ledger. On the last page was a note in his handwriting. "If you feel unsafe, go to the third-floor study and lock the door. The interior bolt has been reinforced." I didn't like that he'd planned for fear so specifically. I also didn't ignore it. After that, the house settled into a routine that was more procedure than comfort. I woke early. I made tea. I reviewed the camera log. I kept my phone on silent. I walked the rooms once each evening, checking locks the way someone checks a perimeter. Not because they expect a breach, but because the act itself keeps the mind orderly. Then the note arrived. It wasn't mailed. It was placed. One night near the end of October, I heard the bell ring once, sharp and deliberate. By the time I got to the foyer, the front steps were empty, but an envelope sat under the porch light, white, clean, heavier than it should have been. Inside was a card with 2 sentences. "We know what you inherited. We know how to take it." No signature, no explanation, just certainty. I called Clara immediately. She didn't sound surprised. "They're escalating," she said. "Keep the envelope. Photograph it. Do not respond to anything." I did what she said. Then I went back to the library and sat in the quiet, listening to the house, letting the fear rise and then pass through without grabbing it. 3 weeks later, the confrontation I'd been expecting finally arrived. It was a Tuesday afternoon in November. I was in the kitchen, kettle warming, when my phone buzzed with a camera alert. Front gate motion. I opened the live feed. Avery was at the gate, Gerald beside her, Trevor a step behind, this time sober, face set like a decision. And with them, a man in an expensive suit holding a leather portfolio. I didn't rush. I turned off the stove. I set the mug on the counter. Then I walked to the foyer and checked the locks, not because they were necessary, but because the sequence kept me steady. I opened the door with the chain on. Avery's expression was different now. No softness, no concern, just impatience dressed as calm. "Lena," she said, "we need to talk." The man in the suit stepped forward slightly.
"Daniel Rourke," he said. "Counsel for your family." I said nothing. Daniel continued, smooth and practiced. "We are filing a motion to contest the will." I held his gaze. "On what grounds?" "Undue influence," he replied. "Samuel Hartfield was elderly, isolated, and not of sound mind. We have testimony that you visited him repeatedly before his death. We have records of calls between your number and his residence." I felt my stomach tighten, but my voice stayed level. "I never visited him." Trevor smiled like he'd been waiting for that line. "That's not what our witness says." Avery leaned in, her voice low. "This doesn't have to be ugly. We can settle." I looked at her, then back to Daniel. "What do you want?" Daniel opened the portfolio just enough to show paper. Not to share it, just to remind me they had it.
"You keep the townhouse," he said. "A portion of the liquid assets. The remainder is divided. Everyone walks away." Gerald's voice cut in, quiet but firm.
This is the smartest outcome.
I let the silence sit for a second. I could hear the kettle begin to hiss faintly in the background, steady and ordinary, like the house refused to join the drama. Then I said, "No." Avery's face tightened. "Lena." "No," I repeated. "You are not owed anything." Trevor's composure cracked. "You're broke. You were nothing 2 months ago. You think you can fight us?" I didn't correct him. I didn't argue about my life. I didn't defend myself. I just stated the boundary again, like it was a line on a form. "This conversation is over," I said. "Leave the property." Daniel smiled, small and confident. "You should understand, Ms. Carlyle. If the court finds the will compromised, you will lose everything." I nodded once. Noted. Gerald stepped forward, anger showing now. "You don't even know what you're doing." I kept my hand on the inside edge of the door, chain still on, voice still even. "I know what I'm not doing. I'm not signing anything. I'm not negotiating. I'm not letting you inside." Avery stared at me with something like disbelief, as if she couldn't accept that my calm was real. Trevor's voice dropped, rougher. "We'll take it." I didn't respond to that. I didn't give him anything to hold on to. I closed the door gently, slid the deadbolt, and leaned my shoulder against the wood for one quiet breath. Then I walked straight to the library, opened my notebook, and wrote the facts. Date, time, names present, claims made, settlement offered, refused. I called Clara. When she answered, I said, "They filed. They're using fake records. They brought an attorney." Clara's voice stayed calm, like she was standing beside me instead of miles away. "Good," she said. "That means we move to the next step." I swallowed. "What step?" "There is something Samuel left for you," she replied. "Something I was not permitted to give you until they made their move." My hand tightened on the phone. "What is it?" I asked. "You'll see," she said. "Come to my office tomorrow morning. Do not speak to anyone else. Do not respond to any message they send. Just come in." I looked down at my notebook, at the clean lines of ink, the facts arranged like protection. "Okay," I said. Then I put the phone face down on the desk and waited in the quiet, letting the house hold its shape around me. Clara's office was in Midtown, in a building that smelled like polished stone and quiet money. The lobby had a security desk and soft lighting that made everything look calm, even when it wasn't. I arrived early. I didn't wear anything expensive. I wore a plain coat, simple shoes, hair pulled back. I wanted nothing about me to look like a performance. I wanted to look like someone showing up for a meeting with documents. Clara met me at the elevator and led me down a hallway into a conference room with glass walls. A box sat on the table. Cardboard, sealed, the kind you'd see in a storage unit, not a law office. Clara sat across from me and placed her hands flat on the table. "Samuel anticipated this," she said. I looked at the box. The contest. "The lies," she corrected. "The fabricated records, the manufactured witnesses." I didn't speak. I waited. Clara opened the box, lifted the flaps, and slid a stack of folders toward me. Not one or two, a dozen at least, all labeled in Samuel's neat handwriting. Gerald, Avery, Trevor. Other names I recognized from distant branches of the family. And then one folder with my name. Lena. I looked up at Clara. "Why is there a file about me?" Clara's expression stayed steady. "Because you documented everything. He was methodical. He treated truth like something you preserve." She opened the folder labeled Gerald first and turned it toward me. Inside were transcripts, call logs, emails printed and dated, notes of meetings, copies of letters. Clara said, "Samuel spent the last 10 years recording every attempt your family made to extract money from him. Every threat, every demand, every time they tried to control him through shame or pressure." My throat tightened slightly. I forced myself to breathe through it.
Clara flipped to a transcript and tapped one line with her finger. Here, your father threatens to contest Samuel's will unless he's paid. This is from 2 years ago. She opened another folder. Here, your sister asks for a loan to cover a mortgage, then another for credit card debt, then another to keep a business afloat. Samuel refused each time. He kept the receipts. He kept the messages. I didn't feel surprised. I felt confirmed. Clara slid a third folder forward. And Trevor. Requests for money to cover gambling losses. Promises to repay. Then no repayment. I stared at the paper. The dates, the amounts, the tone. The pattern was so consistent it looked like a template. Can we use this in court? I asked. Clara nodded. Yes, as evidence of motive, coercion attempts, and pre-existing intent to challenge the will. But Samuel left you more than court evidence. She reached back into the box and pulled out a smaller envelope, sealed, with a note attached in Samuel's handwriting. Release only after the first contest motion is filed. Clara placed it in front of me. This is for you. I opened it carefully. Inside was a thin packet of pages and a USB drive taped to the last sheet. The first page was a notarized affidavit from Samuel's physician, stating Samuel was competent, oriented, and of sound mind at the time the will was executed. Dates, appointment notes, medication list, a clean record. The next pages were video stills with timestamps. Samuel sitting at a table, reading the will terms out loud. Samuel looking directly at the camera and stating, clearly, that no one had influenced him, that the beneficiary had not asked for anything, that the decision was his and his alone. I didn't know I'd been holding my breath until I let it out. Clara said, "The video is on the drive. It's not emotional, it's procedural. He wanted it to be unambiguous." I nodded once. Then I flipped another page and stopped. It was a forensic report summary. Phone records. A carrier letterhead. An explanation that the calls your family claimed existed between my number and Samuel's residence did not originate from my device or account. It referenced spoofing, call forwarding, and a third-party number used to generate a false pattern. Clara watched my face. He suspected they would fabricate contact between you and him. He arranged for a forensic analyst in advance. He secured your phone number history through lawful channels. I stared down at the report like it was something physical I could lean on. So their records are fake, I said, more to myself than to her. Yes, Clara replied, and we can prove they are fake. I sat back slightly. My hands were steady. My mind was moving into order. Step 1, I said, mostly to organize myself. We respond formally to the motion. Clara nodded. Step 2, I continued, we submit the physician affidavit and video. Yes. Step 3, I said, we submit the forensic report to undermine their phone evidence. Clara's mouth lifted slightly, not a smile, more a sign of approval. Correct. I looked at the folders again, and the witness. Clara reached into the box and pulled out one more file. We anticipated that too. Inside was a background check report, a former caregiver with financial issues, previous fraud allegations, and messages showing contact with Trevor in the weeks before the claim was made. There were screenshots of payments, small amounts, sent repeatedly, labeled as something harmless. Can we connect it? I asked. We can, Clara said. We can subpoena. We can request discovery. We can force a deposition. I nodded. Then we do it. Clara leaned forward slightly. One more choice. This is strategic. I waited. You can fight quietly in court and win, she said. Or you can also control the narrative. They are already trying to poison public opinion. Sometimes the cleanest way to stop a contest is to make it expensive socially as well as legally. I sat still, thinking. I didn't like attention. I didn't want my life as a headline again. But I also knew what it felt like to be defined by someone else's version of events. What does controlling the narrative look like? I asked.
Clara slid a thin page toward me. A simple outline. Not dramatic, just steps. A statement to the press. Release of the physician affidavit summary. Release of selected transcripts showing extortion attempts. No emotional language. No personal attacks. Just facts and dates. I read it, then nodded once. Okay, I said. We do it cleanly. 2 days later, I sat in a conference room with bright lights and neutral walls. There were cameras, microphones, reporters who looked like they'd been waiting for a story that didn't require much effort to sell. Clara sat beside me. A folder was placed in front of me, thin, carefully curated. When the questions started, I didn't answer them individually. I didn't let the room pull me into argument. I read a short statement. My name is Lena Carlisle, I said, voice steady. A will contest has been filed against me based on claims that are false. I am not here to debate. I am here to provide documents that clarify the record. I lifted the physician affidavit summary. Not the entire file, just the key page. This is a notarized statement from Samuel Hartfield's physician confirming his competency at the time the will was executed. I lifted the forensic report summary. This is a preliminary forensic assessment, indicating the alleged call records between my number and Samuel Hartfield's residence are not authentic and do not originate from my device or account. I lifted one transcript excerpt with dates visible. This is a transcript of a call in which my father threatens to contest Samuel Hartfield's will unless he is paid. I didn't add commentary. I didn't describe how it felt. I didn't talk about my divorce. I let the documents do what they were designed to do. The room shifted. You can feel it when a story stops being entertainment and starts being risk. After the statement, Clara took questions for a few minutes. She answered like a wall, calm and firm, repeating that filings would be made, evidence would be submitted, and false statements would be addressed through legal process. Then we left. That night, my phone lit up with blocked calls. Emails came in from addresses I didn't recognize. Messages on old social accounts I hadn't touched in years. I didn't respond. I logged everything. I saved screenshots. I forwarded everything to Clara. A week later, Clara called me in the morning. It's done, she said. I stood in the kitchen with a mug of tea warming my hands. Outside the window, a delivery truck idled and moved on. What's done? I asked. Their counsel withdrew the motion, Clara said. They don't want discovery. They don't want depositions. They don't want the forensic analyst under oath. They don't want their witness examined. They're out. I closed my eyes briefly. No fireworks, no celebration, just the sudden removal of pressure. They're going to be angry, I said. They already are, Clara replied. But anger is not a legal strategy. I let a quiet breath out. So it's over. The contest is over, she said. And now, per Samuel's instructions, there is one more item you are entitled to receive. I didn't move. What item? Clara paused. You need to come in. I looked down at the tea. The surface trembled slightly from the way my hand held the mug. Okay, I said. I set the mug down, wiped the counter with a paper towel that didn't need it, and stood there for a moment, listening to the house. Then I picked up my keys and left for Clara's office. Clara's conference room looked the same as before. Glass walls, quiet carpet, the city moving outside without caring what happened inside. This time there wasn't a box on the table. There was only a single envelope. Clara didn't sit right away. She stood near the window for a moment, like she was giving the room a second to settle. Samuel left instructions that you were only to receive this after the contest ended, she said. I sat down slowly. I didn't reach for the envelope yet. I watched Clara's face. You've done what he asked, she continued. You stayed. You didn't fold. You followed the terms. I nodded once. Clara slid the envelope toward me. My name was written on it in the same clean handwriting. I opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph and a letter. The photo was old, slightly faded, taken in warm light. A young woman stood in a garden, smiling like she didn't know she was being captured. Dark hair, familiar eyes. I turned it over. Eleanor, 1966. My mother. I felt my throat tighten, not in a dramatic way, more like my body was bracing for a truth it already suspected. I looked up at Clara. Why is this here? Clara took a slow breath. Because Samuel wasn't only your great uncle. My hands stayed steady, but my mind went very quiet. He was your biological father, Clara said. The words landed without sound. For a second, the room felt tilted, like my sense of time had shifted. I didn't speak. I just looked at the photo again, then at Clara, then back down at the letter in my hands. Clara kept her voice even. Your mother and Samuel had a relationship before she married Gerald. When she became pregnant, she made a decision. She married quickly. Gerald agreed to raise you as his. Samuel agreed to stay out of public view. I stared at the tabletop. The grain of the wood was suddenly something I could focus on. Did Gerald know? I asked. Clara nodded. He's always known. That explained things without needing to explain them. The distance, the tone, the way love always felt conditional, the way I'd been treated like a complication instead of a daughter. I opened the letter and read the first line. Lena, if you're reading this, you made it through them. I read the rest in silence. It wasn't a dramatic apology. It wasn't a grand speech. It was a man putting the truth into a format that could survive. He wrote that he was sorry he hadn't been in my life openly. He wrote that he watched anyway, quietly, consistently. He wrote that the inheritance wasn't meant to rescue me. It was meant to give me footing, a foundation, something solid that couldn't be pulled out from under me by anyone else. When I finished, I folded the letter once and placed it back in the envelope. Then I held the photo for a second longer. Not because I needed proof, but because it felt like a missing piece had finally been returned. Clara didn't rush me. She just sat across from me and waited. After a while, I asked, "What happens now?" "Now you finish the term," Clara said. 6 months, no transfer, no sale, no occupancy by others. After that, the estate is yours outright. I nodded. And what do I do with this? I asked, tapping the envelope lightly. With the truth. Clara's answer was simple. You keep it. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to use it as a weapon. You can let it be yours. I liked that. It felt clean. It felt like a boundary. That evening, back at the townhouse, I did something ordinary. I took off my coat. I washed a mug. I wiped the counter. I checked the cameras. I locked the doors. Then I went up to the third-floor study, opened the desk drawer, and placed Samuel's letter beside the earlier one. I set the photograph in a plain frame I found in a cabinet and put it on the shelf near the lamp. No ceremony, just placement. Over the next months, I stayed inside the terms. I lived quietly. I made routines. Tea in the morning, a walk around the block in daylight, grocery deliveries scheduled, notes logged, silence chosen. When the 6 months ended, nothing exploded. There wasn't a moment where the sky changed color. There was just an email from Clara confirming the transfer was complete, and a stack of paperwork that looked like every other stack of paperwork I dealt with. Except this one didn't take something from me. It confirmed something I'd protected. I didn't sell the townhouse. I cleared the first floor and turned it into offices. Not flashy, just functional. Rooms where people could sit and speak without being watched. A conference table that wasn't meant for performance. A place that felt quiet on purpose. I went back to work in the only way that made sense for me. Structured, practical, focused. I built a small investment firm that funded women-led businesses, especially women who had been financially cornered in marriage, in family systems, in situations where they were told they couldn't survive on their own. I didn't market it like a revolution. I ran it like a process: application, review, due diligence, funding, support. And slowly it became real. Not an empire, not a headline, just a stable thing that helped people stand up again. A year after the contest ended, Grant emailed me. It was short. It started with an apology and ended with a request. I read it once, then I archived it. No response, no debate. Silence again. Chosen. Some people expect closure to look like a conversation. Mine looked like a clean inbox and a locked front door. One afternoon, a woman came to the office without an appointment. Mid-30s, tired eyes, calm voice that sounded practiced, like she'd spent years making sure she didn't upset anyone. She sat in the waiting room holding a manila folder so tightly her knuckles went pale. When I stepped out to greet her, she stood quickly and said, "I heard you help women who are starting over." I nodded and motioned toward my office. "Sit. Take your time." She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for months. And I understood, in a quiet way, that my story wasn't rare. It was just one of the stories that made it through. If you've been listening and you've ever had to rebuild your life in silence, I'm glad you're here. Like and subscribe if you want more calm, real stories like this one. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. 2 popular stories are coming next, and I'll see you there.